Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started. So I'd like to welcome you to the release of the updated edition of PHRC's Fair Housing White Paper, The State of Fair Housing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. My name is Brittany Mellinger, and I'm the Director of Fair Housing and Commercial Property at PHRC, and I'm honored to share this podium with PHR leaders and partners in the work to advance housing access and opportunity. Our first speaker is PHRC's Executive Director, Chad DeYoung-Lassiter, our fearless leader for over 8 years. Welcome, E.D. Lassiter.
Good afternoon. What I hold in my hand is a well-written, well-formulated, substantive, and concise document. And before I get into my prepared remarks, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the individuals that worked in a social justice milieu to put this together. It started with our current Director of Fair Housing and Commercial Property, who just introduced me. Let's give it up for Brittany Mellinger. Our former Director of Fair Housing and Commercial Property, who is now our Director of Rural and Civic Engagement, Director Caroline Griffin. Let's give it up for her. And our twice removed former Director of Fair Housing and Commercial Property, who morphed into our Director of Enforcement and is now one of our Deputy Directors, Adrian Garcia. And last but certainly not least, our Director of Communications, Amanda Brothman. And they say don't get into naming people because then you'll forget, but I'll get out of the way with this last person that intersects all of the policy, because this has implications not just for housing, but it intersects with education, it intersects with so many different things, and that's Director Alana Berman. So once again, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. For 70 years, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission has protected the right to live free from discrimination in Pennsylvania. Long before federal protections existed, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania recognized that housing is not merely a transaction. It is the foundation of stability, dignity, health, and opportunity for individuals, families, and for communities. The expansion of disability protections in 1967, our history reflects that leadership from the passage of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Practice Act in 1955, known as the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, to the expansion of disability protections in 1967 to nation-leading safeguards for older adults, Pennsylvania has constantly and consistently moved the arc of justice forward. Most recently, our regulations have made clear that discrimination because of sex includes sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, and pregnancy, ensuring that LGBTQ+ individuals and expectant parents are fully protected under the state law. These actions, I want to articulate, are not just merely symbolic. They reflect an enduring principle that where you live should never be determined by who you are. Where you live should never be determined by who you are. The State of Fair Housing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania report continues this legacy of leadership. It documents both progress and persistent inequities. It shows us where barriers remain, where opportunity is still unequally distributed, and where policy, enforcement, and community engagement must be and has to be strengthened. The ability to live without fear of exclusion, retaliation, or bias is central to the promise of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act and to the moral fabric of a just Commonwealth, and might I add, a just democracy as well. This report is not simply an academic exercise, but I will say once again, it's well-written, well-formulated, substantive, and concise. I did a leisure read. After that, I did an academic read that incorporated and encapsulated the disciplines of logic, philosophy, sociology, anthropology, but it's also a call to action. Its findings and recommendations challenges government advocates, housing providers, and residents alike to confront systemic barriers and to work collaboratively to ensure that fair housing is not an aspiration, but a lived reality for every Pennsylvanian, every Pennsylvanian. As Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, I reaffirm our unwavering commitment to fairness, justice, and equality. Together, we will continue to build a Commonwealth where race, sex, age, disability, or family status never determines one's access to safe, stable, and dignified housing. Why is that? Because in Pennsylvania, the right to a home must always be the right to belong. Once again, thank you and welcome.
All right, thank you, Edie Lassiter. Our next speaker is State Representative Ismail Smith-Waddell, who serves Pennsylvania's 49th District. He is a fierce advocate for housing protections and services. Welcome, Representative Smith-Waddell.
I paused because I couldn't remember if it was morning or afternoon yet. So good afternoon, folks. As Brittany said, I am State Rep Izzy Smith-Waddell, and I do want to shout out Lancaster's great representation on the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and the work that they do. But for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm kind of an old school guy. And so as I stand here, as I've been reading through this white paper, I have thought about former President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And that indeed, with all the power of the United States, all of the freedoms that we possess, that we ought to offer people four essential freedoms. Those are freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. Making that real here in Pennsylvania, in the birthplace of American freedom, must mean assuring the right of every resident of the Commonwealth to have a safe, warm, and dry home that they can afford. And few entities in Pennsylvania do as much work toward that effort as the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. If you have this, if you happen to turn to page 16, I think we think of the Commonwealth as a place of great bounty, of innovation, of resources. And so if all of that is true, how deep an injustice is it that 113,000 housing units in the Commonwealth have the presence of mold, 90,000 lack a working toilet? I mean, what are we talking about here? That our housing adequacy, that our reputation as a Commonwealth could be so damaged by a failure to attend to the most essential need of every family, which is a safe place to wake up in the morning, to send your kids to school from, to come home from after a hard day's work. So I want to thank the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission for making sure that we do not forget these critical parts of life in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I want to particularly highlight the words in here about the role that evictions can play in a family's life. There's a woman who lives in my district. She was evicted some 10 years ago, 4 years before I met her. She was evicted because she had fled her housing. She fled to Allentown from Lancaster because her boyfriend was beating her up. Like, if we're gonna talk about what we're talking about, she was fleeing domestic violence. She was evicted in a court proceeding that she was not even present for. And so several years later, when she moved back to Lancaster and was again evicted in retaliation by her landlord for pointing out that there was mold in the bathroom, that there were rodents in the kitchen, that the landlord refused to address, she spent a year homeless, in and out of shelter with her 4 children. And I remember talking to her, and she said, that man, I'm not going to name him or her, that man made me homeless once, and now he's making me homeless again. An eviction that was in no way her fault got her rejected from over 31 housing applications, and it took her a year to find housing. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, an eviction record that a landlord sees does not tell you what the eviction was over, does not say how much was at issue, does not include whether or not domestic violence was an issue, and I cannot say this enough because it blows my mind every time. When a landlord sees an eviction record, it does not say whether or not the judge found in favor of the tenant. Let me put that another way. Every year, thousands of Pennsylvanians are denied housing over evictions that never actually happened. That's both wrong and easy to fix. I have legislation in the House. There is companion legislation in the Senate. And so I'm happy to have the opportunity to highlight it as we go from here and think about what are the actions we're going to take to protect housing, a critical component of real freedom here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I want to thank the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission one more time for publishing this document on the state of fair housing in Pennsylvania. My mother used to say, you have to know better to do better, and here I am standing in the main rotunda. So now that we know better, what will we do? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Smith-Wadow. Our next speaker is Angela McIver, the Chief Executive Officer of the Fair Housing Rights Center in southeastern Pennsylvania and a powerful fair housing advocate. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, everyone. Again, I'm Angela McIver, Chief Executive Officer of the Fair Housing Rights Center in southeastern Pennsylvania. In simple terms, the organization's mission is to ensure equal access to housing opportunities for all people. You know, before I go into the white paper that I highly recommend that everyone takes an opportunity to read because I believe it's a strong blueprint for more public and social policy, which includes funding, so that the advocates can do a better job, people can experience better living, but I want to walk it back for a few seconds. Here in the Commonwealth, we have the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. Thank you so much, E.D. Lassiter, for leading the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and making sure that staff is able to fulfill their authority under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, which covers housing. But you know, ancestor Lee Porter, who transitioned last year, is known as the mother of the Fair Housing Initiative program. So for those of you that know about fair housing activities amongst nonprofits in Pennsylvania and around the country, Mrs. Porter was responsible for going to President Reagan back in the 80s and asking for funding so that more advocates could be effective at ensuring people's fair housing rights. Well, before we lost her, the former administration sent a HUD official to document words of wisdom from Ms. Porter, and she said that fair housing is fair living. And I'm here to tell you that if there is fair housing for a group of protected people, then that means everybody benefits from those protections. It's not only the protected groups that are on paper. Again, all people benefit. I actually had professionals to think that only people who were mentioned, like race, color, religion, gender, were protected. I had to correct them and say, oh no, everyone is a member of at least one protected class. So regardless of your race, and we know that's a construct, you're still protected, perhaps through familial status, disability, sex, national origin. We all benefit from this. And why? Not just because it's a civil right. Things had to be civil. We had to teach people how to work around each other, how to share space to live amongst one another, but because it's a human right. But I'm going to walk it back from that. It's more than a human right. It's because of our divine rights. It's our divine right that fair housing is fair living for all people, that we all get a shot to go somewhere where it is safe, someone mentioned earlier, warm, affordable, habitable, to do what? To rest, to dine, to celebrate, to build memories, to have something that you call your own in this Commonwealth, in this country. Now I'm gonna get into the white paper. So testing is king, and I got that out of this, that the investigations that the staff at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commissions conducts is critical to ensuring that people experience social, racial, economic, environmental justice in housing. It's also crucial that here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there's enough funding to go to the groups such as the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, the Fair Housing Initiative programs, and other groups that conduct the investigations and hand them over to the commission when the investigation begins that way. Over the weekend, the Philadelphia Inquirer had this lead. The Philadelphia Inquirer said, real estate agents from major brokerages arranged questionable property deals around Temple University. Very important institution in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Gets great funding to be able to launch people into careers that are meaningful and affect most of our lives. But in that Temple area, that real estate is so important to certain folks that I hope I don't get these figures wrong. Property that started out somewhere around, I'll say, $375,000 was bolstered around $800,000+. Deals like that were being made. And you know who lost? The folks who lived in the homes. There are people right now, there has at least one person, but I'm sure if there's one, there's many more, who have lost homes and they're waiting for us to investigate this claim. Let us be fearless and fulsome with our investigations to make sure that if we have brokerages that are fixing numbers just to get property, that we do something about it. Those people can make money. I have no problem with that. I encourage that, but not on the backs of the people who live in the Temple University area or in other areas. More about this important blueprint to more public and social policy and funding, making sure that we expand protections. Source of income is also critical because more people are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. People can't afford to live in homes. That's why we're pushing more folks into this status of unhoused. And yet, we're taking away the funding in order to help them with the safety net. You think about it. If you have a home and you fail in your home for whatever reason, I'm not judging, for whatever reason, what's under that? Okay, perhaps you can rent. But if your credit is so shot after you fail in your home, what's the safety net under that? You would hope it would be family and friends, but you have people who are detached from family and friends. They don't have that. Then what's next? Well, unfortunately, systematically, housing, shelter, transitional housing, things of that nature have been so defunded in this country, in this state, in many cities, that people cannot land on their feet. Instead, they're landing in institutions where it costs 3 times more in order to be housed. That makes no sense to me. Statewide property maintenance codes, yes, let's please do that. According to this report, you have jurisdictions that are too small to have offices to be able to have code enforcement, or as we have in Philadelphia, licenses and inspections that's paid for. Mold, radon, and other environmental hazards don't just affect the individual, it is a public health problem. So more needs to be done, and helping property management companies or housing providers to be able to look at a standard is a wonderful guide for them to do their work effectively and improve public health in Pennsylvania. Include funding to support housing. Incredibly important because We've been talking about for the last few decades the need for more housing. And from what I understand, I've heard former legislators say it, former elected officials say it, and people with just common sense, that the most affordable home is the one that you're already in. So let's maintain the homes. Let's create and expand funding so that repairs can occur on housing and we don't have to throw people out into a market where it's vicious right now. And eviction history ceilings. The state representative who just spoke mentioned that. Again, critically important because in Philadelphia, there was a time when you had up to 22,000 evictions annually. And who was being impacted by that? Women and children. They were not the only ones. But you think about it. Who needs to be protected in our society? Women and children. Yes, men, there's a place for you. I'm not leaving you out, but you're getting my point. Overwhelmingly, it was women and children who were being evicted. And those eviction records were following people in a way that, as was mentioned earlier, if a prospective landlord saw eviction on the record, they didn't even consider the person for housing. So we can't afford to live like this. It costs too much. It's overlooking our humanity. And if we take things back to our divine right, we have a divine right to live in safe, affordable housing, and let's remove all the barriers that are in place, the systemic, the structural, even the ignorance. So maybe it's not ignorance, maybe it's naivete. Let's remove all of that as well so that we can get more people housed and have a more peaceful and thriving society. Look at it like this. When I'm happy, I'm probably going to make you happy. And when you're happy, you will probably make someone else happy. So let's try to reach for a higher vibration out there and ensure that people are housed as opposed to turning our heads saying it's not my problem when in fact it's all of our problem. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Angela. Our next speaker is State Representative Tim Twardzik, who serves Pennsylvania's 123rd District. He's worked to address community blight and revitalize neighborhoods. Welcome, Representative Twardzik.
Thank you so much. Angela, thanks for that rousing speech. I feel better already. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me here today. I'm honored to join you for the release of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission's newest Fair Housing White Paper. This report shines a light upon the real challenges Pennsylvanians are finding to find safe, affordable, and fair housing. These challenges affect families, neighborhoods, and the future of our Commonwealth. Housing touches every part of our lives, whether it's helping families stay in neighborhoods they love or giving young people a chance to put down roots and build their futures. That is why in Schuylkill County and across the state, I have worked to fight blight and stabilize neighborhoods so communities can remain strong and vibrant. In the legislature, I have worked on bipartisan efforts to strengthen housing stability and affordability. This past year, I co-sponsored bipartisan mortgage relief, a law that passed to give homeowners more flexibility and lower prices. I've also worked with Representative Smith-Waddell on his bill as a co-sponsor as we shepherd that through the process. It's important to fix these foreclosures and give people that chance at the home they deserve. I've also helped secure funding for affordable housing projects in Schuylkill County, supporting families, preventing homelessness, and strengthening our communities. As co-chair of the Pennsylvania Housing Caucus, Representative Lindsay Powell and I are working together in a bipartisan effort to access housing and preserve existing homes across the Commonwealth. Reports like this one, the state of fair housing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, help show where challenges remain and guide the work ahead. I thank the Commission and everyone who contributed to this report. I look forward to supporting the efforts to ensure every Pennsylvanian has a safe, affordable place to call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Twardzik. Our next speaker is Caroline Griffin, previously serving as PHRC's Director of Fair Housing and Commercial Property. She now serves as PHRC's Director of Rural and Civic Engagement. Welcome, Director Griffin.
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany. And thank you all for joining us here today. As Brittany said, I'm Caroline Griffin, Director of Rural and Civic Engagement at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. I'm honored to address you today on behalf of the PHRC and on behalf of the State of Fair Housing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I want to begin by expressing my deep gratitude to the leadership at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, which is central to turning this vision into a reality. Executive Director Lassitier, Commissioners, Director Mellinger, Directors Brothman, Garcia, and Berman, and everyone who made this document possible. This white paper grew from a collaborative effort guided by a shared commitment to justice, opportunity, and dignity in housing. It offers a clear, practical path forward that's both urgent and within reach. The white paper outlines a cohesive set of opportunities that we can advance to secure safe, affordable homes for every Pennsylvanian. It emphasizes protecting incomes that support housing stability, clarifying and enforcing fair housing protections so that complaints can continue to be reviewed and addressed consistently. And it maintains a vigilant, proactive stance in monitoring housing conditions and barriers to fair housing choice. It also calls for thoughtful legislative and fiscal action that strengthens tenants' protections, expands funding for affordable and middle market housing, and promotes eviction ceiling to preserve housing opportunities. What makes these recommendations powerful is their focus on collaboration and implementation. They are not abstract ideals, but a practical agenda for action across the Commission, state agencies, housing providers, and policymakers. They recognize the realities families face: income diversity, housing instability, and barriers rooted in discrimination, and offer a coordinated approach to reduce those barriers and expand opportunities. As we move forward, the goal remains direct: safe, affordable homes, stronger communities, and a Pennsylvania where every neighbor can pursue a stable and secure future. I am proud of the leadership shown by the PHRC and for the partnerships of colleagues across state and local governments who share this vision. May we stand ready to continue contributing through policy development, advocacy, and implementation support to turn these insights into tangible improvements for Pennsylvania. Thank you, Senators, Representatives, Ms. McIver, and all of you for being here with us today to mark this milestone. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Griffin. Our next speaker is Senator Katie Muth, who serves Pennsylvania's 44th District. She has advocated for housing rights and resources, including source of income protections. Welcome, Senator Muth.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, I guess. I'm State Senator Katie Muth. I represent parts of Chester, Montgomery, and Berks County in southeastern Pennsylvania in Senate District 44. I want to thank Brittany, Alana, and everyone here at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission for the invitation to be here today, and thank them for the amazing work that the Commission does every day to protect Pennsylvanians from discrimination. As fundamental civil rights are being attacked at the federal level every day, the work of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission has never been more essential. I'm grateful to stand here alongside the Commission, Senator Comita, and our colleagues in the House to support the release of the newest edition of the PHRC Fair Housing White Paper. The White Paper makes clear what far too many Pennsylvanians already know from their lived experience. We are in the midst of a deep and growing housing crisis. The White Paper also makes several important recommendations to move Pennsylvania toward a more just and stable housing system. One of those recommendations mirrors legislation that Senator Comita and I have championed here in Harrisburg for the past few sessions. Our bill, Senate Bill 1152, would ensure that no individual in Pennsylvania is denied housing based solely on their lawful source of income, including housing vouchers, pension payments, child support, and public assistance. This protection is not radical, it's not too far off the edge, too progressive, it's fair, and it is long overdue. And Pennsylvania, like much of the nation, is experiencing an affordable housing crisis that is squeezing families, seniors, and working people in every direction. According to the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, between 2017 and 2025, the Commonwealth's median home price increased by over 117%. This is an increase I can attest to in Senate District 44 as the cost of housing has gone through the roof. At the same time, the supply of affordable rental units has failed to keep pace with demand. A lot of luxury units, aren't there? Not affordable, but a lot of luxury units getting built everywhere, pushing rents higher and higher and forcing too many people into impossible choices. Statistics from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition show that in 2025, a Pennsylvania worker earning our state's pathetic minimum wage of $7.25 per hour needs to work over 127 hours per week, or the equivalent of 3.2 full-time jobs just to afford one-bedroom rental in our Commonwealth. And yet, even when people do have the means to pay their rent through stable, lawful sources of income, they can still be turned away. That's because in Pennsylvania, landlords are legally allowed to reject tenants based solely on how they pay their rent. Using a housing voucher, Social Security, disability benefits, child support, all of these things are legally allowed to be considered not good enough to pay the rent every month. This discrimination disproportionately impacts renters of color, women, people with disabilities, deepening inequities that already exist in our housing system. If a tenant has the financial ability to pay their rent in full and on time, it should not matter how they legally earn that money. Our neighboring states like New Jersey and Delaware are stepping up, and now it is time that Pennsylvania protects those individuals and becomes a leader on fair housing issues. Fair housing protections are civil right protections, and I believe that housing is a human right. Every person should have a place to live that is safe, that's affordable, and that is reliable. And we have a responsibility here to strengthen and not weaken already pathetic housing efforts here in our Commonwealth. And I'm grateful to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission to continue to shine a light on these issues, and I look forward to working together to ensure that every Pennsylvanian has a fair shot at a safe, stable, and affordable housing. Thank you. I didn't know if you wanted me to answer.
All right. Thank you, Senator Muth. Our next speaker is Senator Carolyn Comita, who serves Pennsylvania's 19th district. She has advocated on a wide variety of community priorities, including source of income protections. Welcome, Senator Comita.
Good afternoon, friends. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Thank you, Senator Muth, my friend and colleague. I appreciate each of you for joining us today. I also want to give a shout out to my colleagues from the House who are here, and thank the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and its director, Chad Dion Lassiter, for bringing us all together today. We're living through some frightening and chaotic times. Our trusted democratic institutions and freedoms are under attack. The cost of living, food, energy, water, and more continue to rise. And important safety net programs are being threatened, rolled back, and cut. Our homes should be a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. Everyone deserves a safe, healthy environment to call home, a warm place to take refuge on a cold winter's day like today. Unfortunately, not everyone has a home. And when it comes to the affordable housing crisis, source of income discrimination is another big obstacle facing lower income workers and families. My friend and colleague, Senator Muth, and I have partnered on legislation to change that. Senate Bill 1152 prohibits property owners from denying housing to individuals based solely on their lawful source of income, including housing vouchers, pension payments, child support, alimony, and public assistance. And I want to point out in this very comprehensive white paper that we all have today, page 5, the page after the executive summary has the list of key recommendations from this research. And the PHRC's number 1 recommendation is exactly what Senator Muth and I are addressing in Senate Bill 1152. And should this bill actually move through the Senate, move through the House, or vice versa, and to the governor's desk, we would be able to eliminate and address this roadblock to housing. Federal, state, and local housing assistance programs are designed to help people access affordable housing. They should not be used as an excuse for landlords to deny or discriminate against potential tenants. When about 70% or more of landlords refuse to accept housing vouchers, finding affordable housing becomes even harder. We developed this legislation with input from housing stakeholders across Chester County, including the Chester County Housing Authority. I'd like to share a few words from its CEO and Executive Director, Paul Diggs, who said, "We know this policy works. States like Maryland have long recognized source of income protections as a critical fair housing tool, and neighboring states, including New Jersey, Delaware, and Michigan, have recently taken action as well. Source of income discrimination only deepens inequality and undermines our collective responsibility to ensure fair, stable housing opportunities for all Pennsylvanians. At a time when Pennsylvania is facing an unprecedented affordable housing crisis, we cannot afford policies that further limit access to housing for working families, seniors, and people with disabilities. If a tenant can pay rent fully and on time, it should not matter whether that income comes from wages, a housing voucher, or a fixed benefit. So having a good, safe, secure, and stable place to call home and to escape the uncertainty of the outside world is vital. It's not something that we take for granted. This bill will help more people find affordable options. We appreciate it being a top recommendation of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. And again, I want to thank the Human Relations Commission, Senator Muth, and each of you for being here. Let's pass this legislation so that more Pennsylvanians and their families can access affordable housing in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Comita. Now, in hindsight, I perhaps should have chosen to go first, not to try to follow such our incredible speakers and leaders. But let me try to bring this program home. I want to start, like my colleagues, with some heartfelt thank yous. Thank you to Angela and the team at the Fair Housing Rights Center in southeastern Pennsylvania for your partnership in advancing fair housing efforts. Thank you to Representative Smith-Waddell, Representative Twardzik, Senator Comita, and Senator Muth for your powerful voices in advocacy and your tireless efforts to pass legislation to advance housing bills that meaningfully improve housing access and opportunity for folks throughout Pennsylvania. Thank you to the whole PHRC team who made this paper possible. Our small and tireless working group consisted of Adrian Garcia, Deputy Director of Regional Operations and Housing, Alana Berman, Director of Policy, Intergovernmental Affairs, and Mediation, Caroline Griffin, our Director of Rural and Civic Engagement, and Amanda Brothman, our Director of Communications. I would also like to thank Deputy Chief Counsels Stephanie Chapman and Morgan Williams for their reviews and contributions. Lastly, but certainly not least, I would like to thank Edie Lassiter and PHRC's commissioners for their leadership in advancing these efforts. But I don't want to spend my whole time saying thank you. As you've heard today, we have work to do. In a time when our federal government is stepping back from their responsibility to meaningfully enforce our fair housing laws that protect us from discrimination, it falls to Pennsylvania to stand in that gap. It starts by acknowledging that our housing gaps and our housing inequalities are not a fluke and they're not an accident. They are a result of past and present policies, practices, and laws that resource some communities and not others. And that is not the Pennsylvania that I want to live in. Fair housing isn't fair when our neighbors are denied housing because of mistakes they made with their landlord 20 years ago, or because their credit doesn't account for the months and years that they faithfully paid rent and utilities. Fair housing isn't actually fair when folks are afraid to exercise their fair housing rights because they have no options on where to go if their housing provider non-renews their lease in response. Fair housing definitely isn't fair when our housing policies appear to be neutral and fair, but have a disproportionate impact in limiting housing opportunities for our seniors, our families, and our community members with disabilities and more. These issues have real impact on Pennsylvanians who need stable, healthy housing in order to raise their families, to hold down jobs with livable wages, to access the care and services they need, and to build the vibrant, resilient communities that we all seek and deserve. So, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission is taking action, so you can find in your copy of our report 6 recommendations. Number 1, you've heard from Senator Comita and Senator Muth about the importance of source of income protections. We will work to bring those protections statewide, not just in isolated communities throughout Pennsylvania. Number 2, we're going to clarify the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act to make it crystal clear that discrimination is not just when someone posts a blatantly unlawful housing ad online or fails to accommodate an individual with a disability. PHRC will define discrimination as including disparate treatment, disparate impact, and perpetuation of segregation. Number 3, we will partner with folks statewide, like our PHRC advisory councils, the Fair Housing Rights Center, the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Task Force, and others to address the systemic inequalities in housing and meaningfully affirmatively further fair housing. Number 4, we will work with legislative partners to enact statewide code enforcement to ensure that your ability to address an issue of a lack of heat or failed plumbing or no electricity, that doesn't depend on what town you live in. No Pennsylvanian should have to endure hazardous living conditions. Number 5, we will work with legislative partners to seek increased funding to support the repair and upkeep of our aging housing stock and the building of new homes that meet the needs of everyday Pennsylvanians. And lastly, but certainly not least, number 6, we will advocate for the sealing of eviction records, as Rep. Smith-Waddell highlighted as well, to make sure that we all have a fair shot at housing. We invite you to join these efforts. This is not work that PHRC can do alone, and we invite you all to lend your expertise, expand your partnerships, and give your voice to this critical work. It will take state and local leaders, community advocates, developers, lenders, landlords, realtors, social service providers, and more, working together to make a meaningful difference. Let's do this. All right. So thank you for coming today, and we'll open it up for any questions.
There has not been funding for the whole home repair statewide version in the last several budgets. I mean, what are our hopes for getting something like that? You mentioned it in number 5, and other funding priorities in this upcoming budget.
Yeah, so that's the whole home repair. The whole home repair program was a really critical tool in addressing the needed repairs in communities throughout Pennsylvania. We really strongly support efforts to continue that funding and as well as other housing programs, so that way we can make sure that folks have safe and healthy homes to live in. All right, thank you all.
Director of Fair Housing and Commercial Property, who just introduced me. Let's give it up for Brittany Millinger. Our former Director of Fair, twice removed former Director of Fair Housing and Commercial Property, who morphed into our Director of Enforcement and is now one of our Deputy Directors. 70 years, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission has protected the right to live free from discrimination in Pennsylvania. Long before federal protection, the expansion of disability protections in 1967, our history reflects that leadership from the passage of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Practice Act in 1955, orientation, gender identity or expression, and pregnancy, ensuring that LGBTQ+ individuals and expectant parents are fully protected under where you live should never be determined by who you are. The State of Fair Housing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania report continues this legacy of leadership.
And services. Welcome, Representative Smith-Waddell.
I paused because I couldn't remember if it was morning or afternoon yet. So good afternoon, folks. Through this white paper, I have thought about former President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that indeed, with all the power of the United States, all of the freedoms that we possess, that we ought to, if all of that is true, how deep an injustice is it that 113,000 housing units in the Commonwealth have the presence of mold, 90,000 lack a working toilet. I mean, what are we talking about here? Family, which is a safe place to wake up in the morning, to send your kids to school from, to come home from after a hard day's work. So I want to,
as the mother of the Fair Housing Initiative program. So for those of you that know about fair housing activities amongst nonprofits in Pennsylvania and around the country, Mrs. Porter ensuring people's fair housing rights. Well, before we lost her, the former administration sent a HUD official to document words of Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. Thank you so much, Edie Lassiter, for leading the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission and making sure that staff is able to fulfill.
I've worked on bipartisan efforts to strengthen housing stability and affordability. This past year, I co-sponsored bipartisan mortgage relief, a law that passed to give homeowners more. I've also helped secure funding for affordable housing projects in Schuylkill County, supporting families, preventing homelessness, and strengthening our communities. As co-chair of the Pennsylvania Housing Caucus,
Expands funding for affordable and middle market housing and promotes eviction ceiling to preserve housing opportunities. What makes these recommendations
Rights and resources, and source of income protections. Welcome, Senator Muth. Good recommendations to move Pennsylvania toward a more just and stable housing system. One of those recommendations mirrors legislation that Senator Kmita and I have championed fully on their lawful source of income, including housing vouchers, pension payments, child support, and public assistance. This protection is not radical.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction.